In 2003, Lego lost approximately 1.4 billion Danish krona. That is roughly 188 million US dollars in a single year from selling plastic bricks. The company that had been named Toy of the Century by Fortune magazine, no less, was burning through cash so fast that executives were privately asking whether the next Christmas would be its last. This is not a story about a bad product. This is a story about what happens when a great company decides it is too good to be careful. Lego was founded in 1932 in Billund, Denmark. A carpenter named Ole Kirk Christiansen started making wooden toys during the Great Depression. He named the company from the Danish phrase "leg godt," play well. By 1958, Lego had patented its now iconic interlocking plastic brick. The design was so precise, studs on top, tubes underneath, that any brick made in 1958 still connects perfectly to one made today. That is not an accident, that is obsession. Through the 1970s and 1980s, Lego was a disciplined, focused machine. One core product, one core market, children, consistent margins, controlled growth. The Christiansen family ran it like a family business because it was one. Then the 1990s arrived. And with them, a dangerous idea, that Lego needed to be more. Between 1993 and 2002, Lego launched theme parks, clothing lines, a television channel, video games, jewelry, watches, and retail stores. They called it diversification. Analysts called it growth. We can call it what it was, a company that forgot what it was for. The theme parks alone, Legoland parks in Denmark, England, Germany, and the United States, required staggering capital investment with uncertain returns. Running theme parks is not the same skill set as manufacturing precision plastic. Somehow, no one in the boardroom found this obvious. Meanwhile, the core product was suffering. Lego sets were getting more complex, more expensive, and harder to build. They had reportedly reduced the number of universal bricks, the simple, open-ended pieces that made Lego, in favor of specialized components for specific sets. A child buying a pirate ship could not easily build a spaceship with the same pieces. The entire philosophy of the toy was being dismantled, one specialized brick at a time. By 2003, Lego employed around 8,000 people and was operating in 30 countries. It had also racked up debt equivalent to roughly 80% of its annual revenue. The toys were not selling, the stores were not profitable, the parks were bleeding cash, and the family at the center of it was watching their grandfather's company approach a cliff. In 2004, Lego's then CEO stepped aside. His replacement was a 36-year-old former McKinsey consultant with no toy industry experience. His name was Jørgen Vig Knudstorp. The board, apparently desperate, handed him the company. He had been with Lego for exactly 3 years. Knudstorp's first act was not a vision statement. It was an audit. He wanted to know exactly what Lego was worth, exactly what it owed, and exactly which parts of the business were actually making money. The answer to that last question was uncomfortable, almost nothing outside the core brick. His diagnosis was blunt. Lego, he reportedly told the board, was on a burning platform. Not struggling, not challenged, burning. He said the company could be bankrupt within 2 years if nothing changed. The board approved his restructuring plan. They had very little choice. What followed was one of the most disciplined corporate retreats in modern business history. Knudstorp sold 3 of the 4 Legoland parks to the Merlin Entertainments Group in 2005 for an estimated €460 million. Lego retained a minority stake, kept the brand licensing fees, and shed the operational nightmare. That is not selling the family silver. That is knowing which silver was actually yours. The clothing line was discontinued. The television channel was shut down. The retail stores were dramatically reduced. Non-core product lines were killed. Knudstorp cut the company's workforce by roughly 35%. Approximately 1,000 jobs were eliminated in Billund alone. These are real people. The numbers are clean. The reality behind them is not. But cutting costs was only half the strategy. The other half required genuine courage, admitting that the product itself had drifted. Lego went back to its engineers and its most devoted customers, the adult fans, the so-called AFOLs, adult fans of Lego, and asked what had been lost. The answer was consistency, simplicity, and the open-ended creativity that made the original brick transcendent. Lego also made a counterintuitive licensing decision that the industry initially dismissed. Instead of avoiding pop culture partnerships, they leaned in, but selectively. The Star Wars licensing deal, which had actually begun in 1999, was now properly resourced and prioritized. It would eventually become one of the most profitable toy licensing arrangements in history. They also restructured manufacturing. Lego had been outsourcing production to a company called Flextronics, moving factories to Eastern Europe and Mexico to cut costs. By 2008, they had pulled most production back in-house, back to Billund and to their Czech facility, because quality control on a product with tolerances measured in microns cannot be an afterthought. The savings from outsourcing had not been worth the risk to the one thing Lego could not afford to lose: precision. The results were not immediate. Turnarounds rarely are, but by 2005, Lego reported its first profit in years. By 2007, revenues had climbed back strongly. By 2010, Lego overtook Mattel's Barbie as the world's top-selling toy brand. Read that again. By 2013, exactly a decade after the near-death year, Lego had become the world's most profitable toy company by operating margin. Not the biggest, the most profitable. In 2015, it briefly surpassed Ferrari as the world's most powerful brand according to the Brand Finance Global 500 report. A Danish brick company, more powerful brand than Ferrari. In 2014, the Lego Movie, a film that had every reason to be a cynical cash grab, earned over $468 million at the global box office and a 96% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes. Critics called it a love letter to creativity. Lego called it a revenue stream. Both were correct. By 2022, Lego reported revenue of approximately 64.6 billion Danish krone, roughly $8.7 billion US dollars. The workforce had grown to over 25,000 employees. The company that was hemorrhaging nearly $1 million a day in 2003 had become one of the most valuable privately held consumer brands on Earth. So what is the lesson? It is not that diversification is always wrong. It is that diversification without identity is just expensive distraction. Lego forgot what made it irreplaceable and almost paid for that amnesia with its existence. The companies that survive long enough to matter are the ones that understand their core values so clearly that they can say no to almost everything else. Knudstorp did not save Lego by inventing something new. He saved it by remembering something old. That is much harder than it sounds. If you want to understand how another beloved company nearly destroyed itself through the exact same mistake and took an entire industry down with it, the story of Kodak is waiting for you. Subscribe for more hidden empires.